So we move on to our core main event, and it's the girl who got knocked out by Alexis Davis versus the girl who got submitted by Jermaine Durandamy. It's Nunes versus Pena, bantamweight title on the line. Now, you know me, John. I do like my stats, and I've come up with an absolute belter here. When Amanda Nunes steps into the octagon at UFC 269, it will be 729 days between title defenses. Now, that is the longest gap for any belt in UFC history. The second longest was Cain Velasquez, which was 602 days between the third fight with Junior Dos Santos and the match with Fabricio Verdum. Now,
wow.
Exactly. It just goes to show, and anybody who's been following the channel, watches me on these videos, follows me on social media, knows I've been very critical of what's happened to the women's bantamweight division over these past few years. How can the UFC expect fans to be invested in the weight class when the belt's not being defended and the company are making no attempt to try and build new contenders?
Well, like they can't be interested. It's it's kind of like an oxymoron at this point. We've been pretty vocal advocates of all this for a while. I mean, it's she does get a little bit of slack because she did defend the belt in other divisions. But you still got to feel for some of these other bantamweights. I mean, Holly Holm, Rena Aldana, they're kind of just trapped in limbo at 135. Raquel Pennington as well. Avila was on her way up, but now, her progress is kind of halted as well. So there's just not really much going on in that division. And I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I think it's a really low level division. I mean, we saw, Aspen Ladd's embarrassing ass. She was number 3 in that division, right? And she just looked, absolutely terrible, missing weight, then fighting and looking absolutely terrible. So there's just not much to care about at this bantamweight weight class. Not really much to care about this fight either.
I think what makes things worse for a lot of people who are upset about it is we saw what happened with Francis earlier this year. Like, Francis wins the heavyweight title, and 4 months later, the company decide you're not being active enough, and they create the interim belt for Cyril Gane. Yet another one of their champions is allowed to go 2 years without defending a belt, and the UFC haven't done anything about it. And I think you sort of mentioned it before. I think there's a big issue with a lot of the big relevant matches atop the weight class aren't happening. Like, if you look at the sort of top rung of bantamweight fighters, Nunes hasn't fought there for 2 years. Holly 1 year, Jermaine 1 year, Aspen 2 years. Like, you can make a big argument the reason Pena's getting this title fight is she's been the only bantamweight fighter who's been trying to stay active, and more than anything, trying to get people to care. Like, say what you want about Julianna. I know there's a lot of fans that don't like her, but she's doing her damnedest to try and sell this fight.
Yeah, I mean, it's all for nothing too. So I don't give her too much credit for that. I think it would be more noble of her to just no sell it. Be like, yeah, probably gonna lose. Fight's probably gonna suck. That would be more noble. Vieira probably would have been in her spot if she got that decision over Kunitskaya. Just bad timing for her with the end of that round 3. But yeah, let's get into knocking off this prediction of ours. I mean, it seems obviously a matter of how Nunes will win, how quickly she will win. And, Sarah McMahon was able to take down Pena and out-grapple her for the first 2 rounds of that fight. If she didn't, gas out severely in round 3 and lose in typical Sarah McMahon fashion, it could have been a 30-27 grappling clinic from Sarah McMahon. So you got to think that Nunes should be able to take her down with ease. You should be able to think that Nunes should be able to outstrike her with ease. And it just seems like a matter of how long will Pena last before getting finished. The over in this fight is set at 1.5 rounds, which is as low as it gets, especially in a 5-round fight. So what are you thinking, Carl? You thinking over or under 1.5 rounds?
I think it might go into the second. I think it's going to be one of those situations where most of the damage is done in the first round and then the job gets done in the second. I wouldn't be surprised as well if we maybe see Nunes trying to do it by submission because that has been a big Pena weakness. We've seen far weaker grapplers than Nunes be able to finish Pena. So obviously we saw Jermaine Durandamy with the guillotine. Shevchenko got an armbar off her back. So I think that maybe that's a big concern. I can look. I can see there are people out there who do think that Julianna Pena could cause some problems. And if we have had a look through some of Pena's previous fights, one of the things she is able to do is to make it a dirty, grimy, gritty fight. And we have seen Pena take down fighters who traditionally have very good takedown defense. We've seen her take down Jermaine, who was a far bigger fighter. We've seen her take down Shevchenko. So there is a possibility for Pena, if she is able to survive the onslaught, to maybe turn it into that grimy match. But the flaws she shows in terms of her striking, and especially in terms of how slowly she starts fights, she's never going to be able to get the chance to do it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of good points there. I mean, you're giving Pena her,
Well, I'm trying to.
some respect. Yeah, yeah, and it's I think you brought up as good as points as you can for a fight like this. Pena does typically lose round one, but she does have some good fight in her. Lost round one to Zingano, to Montano, and to McMahon, and was able to come back and win all three of those fights. But she also was winning versus Durandame, I think, early on, and then went on to lose that fight. So it seems like she really struggles putting together a solid 15 minutes. It seems like she can have a good 2 rounds, but she really has never had a good 3-round performance. Maybe the Jessica Eye fight from way back in the day, but if Pena can get on top, we have seen I don't even know if I would go as far to say we have seen Nunes struggle off her back. I mean, we had way back in the day, but it's hard. She hasn't done anything recently to say that she struggles off her back. So maybe if Pena can get in top position, we can see a situation like the Maia and Shevchenko fight, where maybe Maia gets on top to win 1 round and makes it randomly closer than we expect in 1 round. But ultimately, you got to think Nunes should prevail. You got to think if Nunes gets on top, there's a good chance that Pena doesn't get up, that it's either the round is going to be over or she's going to get finished, because when Pena gets taken down, she really struggles getting off of her back. You can see that in the Montano, the Zingano, and the McMahon fight, all women who are, inferior grapplers to Nunes. So I think it'll probably be 2nd or 3rd round finish for Nunes. So I'll go with the over 1.5 as well. I think Pena can make it 7.5 minutes.
It's a good thing you mentioned there about Nunes being off her back, because you're going to love this. The last person to take down Nunes was Rocky Pennington.
Wow. Well, how much control time did she get off of it? 2 minutes and 13 seconds. That's what they have in the stats for the overall fight. So, maybe that's worth going back and looking to see how she looked off her back. Do you remember what happened once she got taken down?
I think Raquel had taken a lot of damage by that point. I think it was just a case of take her down, and Rocky didn't really. I mean, there was a couple of rabbit shots, stuff like that, but nothing meaningful in terms of massive offense.
One thing I want to bring up that I haven't thought about till now is Nunes' energy at 135 versus 145. She seems a lot more conservative with her energy at 135. Remember the Durandame fight, arguably gassed out in that 2nd or 3rd round. I mean, she looked extremely tired in that 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, doing the bare minimum, getting those takedowns. And I mean, Durandame is terrible off of her back, just like Megan Anderson is terrible off of her back. And Nunes, you see against Anderson, going ape shit in round 1, searching for that finish and finding it. Versus Durandame, she was content to lay and pray for 20 minutes in that fight or something like that and just do nothing on top. No attempt to finish, no attempt to arm triangle or nothing. So it's really it's a good question. I think it'll either be over in the first 3 minutes, or maybe we actually might get a really long, boring decision from Nunes, which I know you would love to see, to lower her fan appeal even more than it already is. But I think we've discussed this enough. I'll go with Nunes submission round 3.
I'm going to say Nunes submission round 2, but I'm glad you mentioned the difference between 145 and 135, because that's a factor that a lot of people aren't bringing up. This is going to be Nunes' first fight at 135 for 2 years. And I've seen a lot of fighters who have spent a long time in one weight class, try going back down, and in some worst case scenarios, completely lose everything that made them so good. The one that comes to mind for me is Roy Jones. Like Roy Jones goes up to heavyweight, tries going back down to middleweight, loses all of his speed, his elusiveness, hasn't got the same pop on his shots anymore. Tarver knocks him out in 2 rounds. Now that's obviously a worst case scenario. But when you bear that in mind, 2 years away from the division, her weight cuts were always already severe. You go back and you watch the weight cuts at 239, and for the Jermaine fight, she barely made the scales. That's something to maybe bear in mind, that that weight cut could be very, very hard 2 years later as an older fighter who's been away for a bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the Roy Jones example, but you can just look at her own career. I mean, she had 2 of her best career performances at 145, knocking out Cyborg, knocking out Holly Holm at 145, and then dropped down to 135 later in the year and looked extremely underwhelming. Arguably, her worst performance in 6, 7, 8 years. That fight against Durandam, just awful. I mean, they should erase that fight from UFC Fight Pass history.
I am going to make a bit of a bold prediction, though. And I want to know if you think that there's maybe some sort of method in my madness, as it were. I'm going to make a bold prediction. Nunes is going to win this fight. There's no question about that. But during the post-fight interview with Joe Rogan, she takes the gloves off and leaves him in the center of the cage.
I can see it. I can see it, and I would honestly respect her more than I have for the past few years if she decided to do that. She has really little left to or nothing left to prove, really. I mean, what is there left for her? Ketlin Vieira? Really? That's it. Ketlin Vieira and Irina Aldana are the only, respectable women that she hasn't beat. I mean, I don't think that she has to stick around to fight those two. She, has a daughter now. It seems like her wife, Nina, might be done fighting as well. She had a pretty bad showing.
Against Mackenzie Dern.
Has Nina got another fight announced yet?
She was supposed to fight...
Yeah, no, but has she announced another fight?
She was supposed to fight Lemos on the end of year card, but that got pulled out. Angie Hill's taking a place. Ooh.
Yeah, she should retire too, Nina. They should both retire, sail off into the sunset. I'm sure Nunes has got a few million in the bank. And yeah, that's a good prediction. I like it. I won't say I agree because I don't want to steal your thunder, but I like the idea.